Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. Along with Vincent Turner, I'm Harper LeBel. Our producer today is Brian LeBel, and today, Vincent, we're going to talk about Tim Brown. What an amazing wide receiver. Great story behind all of his accomplishments, some very unique things that took place in his life, and we're going to discuss that today here on our Legend Show.
Tim Brown, what can you say? Touchdown Jesus, Notre Dame University. Then he became a Raider. But what I remember about Tim Brown, when he came out of high school and he went with Notre Dame, he was electric, special, must-see TV. Back to you, Hart.
Well, absolutely. So he was an MTV, but Mr. T is one of the nicknames that he got. But Timothy Donnell Brown, born on July 22nd, 1966 in Texas, and he ends up going to Woodrow Wilson High School there in the Dallas area. And there's a little bit of a story here. His parents, his father is Eugene, mother is Josephine, and mom didn't want him to play football, even though she was quoted as saying when Tim was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, he was always outside. He was always playing, running around. We wouldn't see him until it was time to eat or until the sun went down. And the games were usually over then, right when the streetlights go on. But she found out that he was playing football in a very unusual way. His freshman year, she flat out forbid him to play. And he played in the marching band. He was a drummer. And he got to watch. He got to be a part of what he would end up loving, the game itself. But his father kind of snuck a signature on a permission slip to allow him to play his sophomore year. And here's where the funny part comes in for me. Tim had already made the team and was playing for the varsity. Coach said, I'm not letting this kid, he's not playing any JV. But his mother was notified by the band director that, hey, Tim wasn't at practices. Mom was going, hey, how's he doing in the, as a drummer? And word gets back. And so there's a little come to Jesus meeting that they had in the Brown house. But Tim had already made the varsity. They were still waiting to play their first games, but his career, although it was preempted by mom, it eventually turned out to be a great one. But high school at Woodrow Wilson, they weren't very good, Vincent. He only won 4 games in the 3 years that he played. They lost 25. They had 1 tie. So let's give him credit for 5 times they didn't lose. But my goodness, very tough road. But that did not keep Tim from running his hardest, playing his best. He was a track athlete too. He ended up in the combine running a 4.39, so that he could run. But great talent, and he learned how to handle the football as a receiver, as a kick returner, and a punt returner. And those were some skills that would get him recruited pretty heavily throughout the Southwest Conference back in those days.
You know, when you think about Tim Brown, he had to be a bad, bad man. I'm going to say bad Leroy Brown, the south side of Chicago. His high school, what you said the record was, Harp, it was 4-25-1 in his career.
Then during those 3 years, yes.
That's a lot of losing, man.
It is.
And usually a lot of recruiters don't even come to your school. Because the first thing they're going to look at, he must not be a good player. He must not be this, because they losing. But what I came away from is that he still was on the radar of all the top teams in the country. His 5 official visits: Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Barry Switzer wanted him as a wishbone running back. SMU wanted him. Nebraska and Tom Osborne wanted him. And Iowa wanted him. That's saying a lot right there, man. They're saying they're looking above you playing on a losing team. Your talent got to be very special. And it was very special when he got to Notre Dame. Back to you, Hall.
Yeah, that was an interesting scenario. Now, SMU, which is right down the street from where he grew up, they were also interested in him as well. And he was thinking, maybe Southwest Conference. I might go to Baylor, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, as you mentioned, and Texas were interested. But mom wanted the education to be taken care of.
Yes,
she was kind of like she didn't want him to play no foosball like in The Waterboy when Adam Sandler's mom. She wanted to get him to get an education, and his older brother was one of the ones to kind of convince the family. When Jerry Faust came down to visit with him, and let's be honest, there are not a lot of kids from Dallas that want to go up and play in the snow and the cold and go up to school at Notre Dame. But when he stressed, this is the older brother, stressed the educational aspect of that, mom and dad both kind of gave in and go, you're going to go play for the Irish. And so he does. Jerry Faust was the head coach for 2 of those years. Notre Dame kind of struggled a little bit, but what an honor, what a thrill for this guy to be awakened to the tradition, the prestige, and the Golden Dome and everything that's associated with Notre Dame. He really loved it. And he has done some videos since for the university. For obvious reasons, it's meant a lot to him. But when he first got there, he was very impressed. The educational aspect was obviously a big part of it, but the football as well. Big-time football now, and he got to play at the highest level. And he got to see the field from the very first time that he got to wear the uniform, his freshman year. They said they were going to bring him in slowly. They were going to kind of introduce him, give him a few plays here and there. Right before that first game, Jerry Faust walks up to Tim and goes, hey, Brown, you're the one returning the opening kickoff. Good luck. Let's go. And so he was awakened, if you will, to it wasn't so fast. Excuse me, it wasn't slow. It was very quick, but he gets to be a part of Notre Dame football, and what a difference that makes in his life.
His game took it to another level when the young man got hired out of Ohio, the former defensive coordinator at Ohio State, former coach at Arkansas. When Lou Holtz came on the scene, we says elevation.
Yep.
Time to get busy. Do you want to be a star? And man, did he become a star under Lou Holtz? And when you look at his skill set, like I said, Mr. Tim Brown, electric, A+. The hands, A+. The concentration, A+. The body control, A+. The route running, the quickness, the separation. That's what I saw with Tim Brown at Ohio State. At Notre Dame. And think about his final 2 seasons at Notre Dame. If you got the stat level over there, Harp, I give it to you, or I can tell you right now. But look at his final 2 years playing at Notre Dame. That's why he won the Heisman Trophy. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, that freshman year when he starts out, they go 7-5. They lose to SMU in the Aloha Bowl. Oddly enough, he was thinking, or at least considering that. He had 28 receptions. He only had 1 touchdown his freshman year. In 1985, they go 5-6, and Jerry Faust is fired. He had 25 receptions, 5 touchdowns during that year. And when Lou Holtz sees him in spring ball, he says, this is the finest player I've ever seen. And Lou Holtz has been known for his quotes, and for obvious reason, to be an impressionable person on someone with the standard that Lou Holtz has. You obviously have to be pretty good. But they wanted to get the ball in his hands more. But remember, they were not a run and gun throwing team. Notre Dame, it was a run first, run second, maybe run third team. And yet he still wanted to get the ball into Tim Brown's hands as much as he possibly could. They were 5-6 that first year with Lou Holtz. They were 1-4 at one point. But he ends up with the school record 1,937 all-purpose yards that year. They put him in as a receiver. They let him run the ball a few times on those sweeps that you would have as a kickoff and as a punt returner. And he establishes himself as one of these guys that you can rely on him. And then his senior year, Vincent, they go 8-4. He's an All-American. He's the UPI Player of the Year, Sporting News Player of the Year, Walter Camp Award winner, and he is the 7th Notre Dame Fighting Irish player to win the Heisman Trophy. And the first from Woodrow Wilson High School, he and Davey O'Brien both win the Heisman Trophy. It's the only high school that's ever had 2 Heisman Trophy winners that have been produced from the same location. So obviously that senior year, Notre Dame at 8-4, they go to a bowl game, but they still have some building to do before they become a national power. But Tim Brown helped produce some of the great players that ended up being difference makers there. That final game that he plays against USC, basically he won the game himself. Everyone will say he had a kickoff return, he had a touchdown as a receiver, he had 3 big punt returns that helped the Irish overcome a 13-point deficit, and they end up beating the USC Trojans there in California.
Let's talk about his senior year when he won the Heisman. I'm gonna leave it at this. Second game of the year, must see TV. I'm living in Knoxville, Tennessee. Just recently got married. They playing that Michigan State team. They had Tony Manrich, Andre Rison, and Percy Snow, had a highly ranked running back in Lorenzo Wright. And that's when he won the Heisman. And remember, Michigan State had a punter by the name of Thunderfoot Greg Montgomery, who had a pretty good career with the Houston Oilers.
Yep.
And them two punts, the first one, Tim Brown takes it. I don't know who was announcing the game on ESPN, but all I know, he took it to the house, and touchdown Jesus was at another level. Praise Tim Brown. Then he comes back, the next punt, and he takes it 68 yards to the house, and an announcer says, the Heisman has been wrapped up. Tim Brown, electric, must see TV. Back to you, Harper.
They win against Michigan in game one, 17th ranked Michigan State, game two. And you're right. He set a record for back-to-back punts. He said, man, I was so gassed after the first one. I told the coach, because I can't go out there, especially if you want me to go play, a regular wide receiver on offense. He didn't have any air, man. They needed some oxygen. They end up losing to Pittsburgh, though. And Pittsburgh wasn't ranked at the time. They lose 30-22. That game was in Pitt Stadium. They beat Air Force, USC, Navy, Boston College, and then Alabama. And then they go through a little losing streak. Unfortunately, they lose at Penn State. They play number 2 Miami there at the end of the year. I don't think that was the Convicts versus Catholics game, but could have been. They got shut out 24-0 there. And then they lose to some guy named Jackie Sherrill in Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl, 35-10. But still, a great season for obvious reasons. Winner of the Heisman. Miami ends up being number 1. Syracuse is number 4. Florida State, they finished second that year in terms of the independents back in those days. And Notre Dame was, they finished number 17. But as we mentioned earlier, Tim Brown was a part of that turnaround there for Lou Holtz in the Irish. And it was just a couple of years later that they'd be playing for and winning national championships.
Well, they won a national championship the next year, Notre Dame did. And you got to think Tim Brown set the stage for that, because the 88 team had Ricky Waters, Rocket Ismail, Chris George, Pat Terrell, Todd Light, Michael Stonebreaker, Wes Pritchard from the Atlanta area. But Tim Brown and that team in 87 set the tone for that team to come in 88 and win it all.
Yeah.
Outstanding football player at the touchdown Jesus, Notre Dame. Back to you, Harper.
Well, in 88, he gets drafted in the first round, number 6 overall by the Oakland Raiders. And there's a little bit of a deal there where Al Davis had said publicly that he didn't really like Notre Dame wide receivers. He had had a few in the past, and they just weren't tough enough. They didn't stick around long enough. But he joins a team in 1988 with the Oakland Raiders that have Mervin Fernandez, James Lofton, Willie Gault, and then you throw Tim Brown into that receiver room. You got Todd Christensen playing tight end for him. And Todd wasn't a blocking guy. Let's freely admit it. But if you're going to throw it, Todd's going to catch it. And especially over the middle of the field, you're going to get your first down. You got Marcus Allen, Bo Jackson. Where do you go with the football if you're on offense? You're going to have 4 guys that are going to be upset no matter who you give it to. And they struggled, the Raiders did, for a couple of years. Now, they went to the playoffs, and they end up going to the AFC Championship game in 91, but they lose badly in Rich Stadium there in Buffalo. 51-3 was the final. And there are some rough times there in Oakland, in Los Angeles with the Raider organization. And when they go back to Oakland, it took a couple of years for them to reestablish themselves. But it wasn't always bright lights, shiny smiles everywhere. There were some struggles there with the Raider organization.
I think when you look at it and you think about what he had to go into, Tim Brown, and playing with all those great other receivers, then you had Bo Jackson at the area, you had Marcus Allen. You had a lot going on in the Raiders organization. But the one thing, he persevered, ended up having a pretty good career with the Raiders. And he got to the ultimate game, the Super Bowl, with Jerry Rice. But if you look at his career, he was like, a 7 or 8 time Pro Bowler with the Raiders?
Oh, yeah.
Look at his numbers. Hall of Famer. He had to be doing something right. And to be honest about it, the Raiders wasn't really a good team, really doing the mid-90s and let's say in the early 2000s. But Tim Brown had like a quiet success because you would really never thought of him of being really a guy that was putting up numbers because the Raiders had so much going on. Then with Marcus Allen leaving, going to Kansas City, Bo Jackson with his hip injury, it was just so much with the Raiders organization, the rotation at the quarterback position, Jay Schrader, they brought in a young Todd Milanovic that didn't work out, but he was still putting up numbers. And he did it quietly. And look at, we talking about him today as a Hall of Famer. But if you go back and you look at those Raiders teams, you wouldn't even put it in the sense that he had that type of career. But respect to Tim Brown. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, I think before he gets to Oakland, the Jim Plunkett era with the Raiders, or the Ken Stabler in the 70s and going into the very early 80s, there was an established quarterback. Steve Berline, who he had played with at Notre Dame, was the Raider quarterback. And you mentioned Marinovich, Jay Schrader, Jeff Hostetler. There were a couple of guys that kind of went through the Raider organization, but I think that was the one telltale piece for the organization as a whole that wasn't very consistent. But you had some talent all the way around, good enough offensive line, but the Raiders really struggled for many of those years. Drafted in 88, they go 7-9 that year. He had 43 receptions, 6 touchdowns, and he was a member of the all-rookie team. He hurts his knee in 1989. I remember when I was with Seattle with the Seahawks that year, he wasn't a part of that. Bo Jackson was still a part of it, yes, Marcus Allen, but Tim Brown didn't get to play that year. He injured himself, I think, week 3 or 4 early in the season. 90, they go to that AFC Championship. I mentioned that, and they lost to Buffalo badly, 51-3. He had 18 receptions that year and 3 touchdowns. So really a minimal, quiet, if you will, perspective to agree with what you were saying. In 91, he has a little bit of a breakout. 36 receptions, 5 touchdowns. He had a punt return. They were 9-7, and they go to the wild card game, but they lose that. 92, they were 7-9. Jeff Hostetler, as I mentioned, joins them in 93. He goes to the Pro Bowl, has 80 receptions. Jeff Hostetler loved him. Throws to him just about every other pass attempt. 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns for him, but they end up losing in the divisional playoff round to Buffalo. They go back to Oakland in 94, and it wasn't until 98 when John Gruden joins there. And they had a guy named Rich Gannon. And an interesting little story about Gruden and Rich Gannon. Rich was trying to keep his career going. He had been with the Minnesota Vikings. He ends up with Washington and plays well enough to be brought into Oakland. You're going to be our number one guy. We want to put the shoulder on your shoulders, the weight of our entire organization. And there was a thing where Gruden would get to work at 5, and he'd see Rich Gannon's car in the parking lot, and he'd be waiting for him. So then he'd come at 4:45, and Rich would already be there. They eventually give Rich a key to the office because he and Gruden were both coming in at 4:30, 4:25, 4:20. They were getting in there so early, but Rich was a gym rat, so to speak, and a film junkie. He'd want to get started real early. Now, I bet he went to bed at 8 o'clock at night, but nonetheless, his determination helped change things dramatically. And remember, Gruden gets that nickname Chucky back during those days. One of the players had seen him and goes, "Man, that guy gave me a look. It was pretty scary, like Friday the 13th. I thought he was going to take my head off." Gruden had that type of personality. But the Raiders were getting better, and he was building them up. And then he has an argument, does John Gruden, with Al Davis. They let him go. He goes to Tampa. Well, guess who goes to the Super Bowl that year? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. After all that Tampa had been doing with Tony Dungy, Gruden takes over there and takes the Buccaneers to the Super Bowl in San Diego against the Raiders. Bill Coughlin was the coach.
Callahan.
They ran the same offense, and they didn't switch any of the audibles. All the plays were the same. So Gruden knew this. And whenever they said Omaha, Lightning, Thunder, he knew exactly what they were going to do. And it was a blowout. 5 interceptions, one of the most embarrassing games from an offensive perspective that you could ever put together. Tampa Bay ends up defeating them, but that was Tim Brown's one and only Super Bowl appearance during a great 17-year career. He only got to play in the game once. At least he got to play in it. But what an outstanding job that he did there with the Raiders organization, a leader in so many different ways. Sorry, Vincent, I took too much of the mic there, but just wanted to make sure I shared a couple of those stories.
Hey, excellent information, because tell you a true story that a lot of people don't know. In all my life, I only wanted to go to one Super Bowl. That was the Super Bowl I attended. Back to you, Hawk.
Well, when he was done, he did a little bit of a acting career. He tried that a little bit, was on the air broadcasting. He has a NASCAR ownership, right? Some things that he's tried to do after that. He's the commissioner of the Arena League. So Tim Brown has stayed involved with football, but as a college and professional Hall of Famer, what an amazing career. I'll give you some statistics. 1,094 receptions, 14,900 yards, 100 touchdowns, exactly 100. Steve Largent, when I played with Steve my last year in 1989, he ended his career with 100. So he's in great company. 4,555 total return yards, 4 touchdowns that he gets on the return game, which is not easy to do, but certainly a presence in so many different ways. As a member of the Los Angeles and Oakland Raiders that 1 year in 2004 with Tampa Bay, commissioner of the Arena League. But here are some real quick stats and highlights from him. Second team All-Pro in 1987. 9 times he goes to the Pro Bowl. He was the NFL receptions co-leader in 1997. He was a kick return leader in 1988. He was a member of the All-90s Decade Team, Pro Football Writers All-Rookie Team in 1988, along with Chris Spielman, actually. Wins the Heisman Trophy, the Walter Camp Trophy, the Sporting News Player of the Year, the UPI Player of the Year. He was a unanimous All-American in 1987, and again, a Pro Football and College Football Hall of Famer. What else, Vincent, can we say about Tim Brown?
Outstanding career. Woodrow Wilson High School out of Dallas, Texas. Went to what a lot of people say in the #1 university when you talk about college football in Notre Dame. Played with the silver and black. What's the motto, Al Davis? Excellence. What more can you say? Outstanding career, Hall of Famer. It was a joy today to talk about Tim Brown. And I'm going to tell you this, a lot of respect for him, because when you get to a level and you're coming out of high school when you only won 4 games and you lost 25, and then you going into Notre Dame, that's already telling me that you're a very mature guy. It's not so much about the winning. It's about what you're going to do as an individual, as a player, as a person, and can you be respected in that arena? And I think today, after we finish with Mr. Tim Brown, I think we're going to have a lot of respect once we end the day here on 100 Yards of Football. Back to you, Hawk.
Yeah, there were a couple of great receivers that in Buffalo and Indiana, with the Colts, Indianapolis, the Eagles. There are different guys, and his patience paid off, obviously. There was a juggernaut, a logjam of different wide receivers, and so Tim didn't get in probably on the first boat because of the logjam that they had, but obviously everyone recognized his excellence, his talent, and his abilities. And even though he wasn't a Super Bowl champion or national champion in collegiate aspects, he was certainly a great receiver, and one that everybody noticed and was on the list in the podium in terms of his greatness. So we want to honor him as well. We want to say thank you for tuning in and being a part of the Legend Show. We got to honor Tim Brown here today. So for Vincent Turner, our co-host and founder, for Brian LeBel, our producer and engineer, I'm Harper LeBel saying thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day.